Part 1. The Mysterious Visitor. The rain hammered against the windows of Emma's small apartment, the relentless downpour matching the storm raging inside her mind. It had been a long, tiring day, and she was relieved to finally be home in the quiet solitude she cherished. Yet, tonight, the silence felt wrong. There was an odd heaviness in the air, a sense of something looming just beyond her reach. The walls of her apartment, usually comforting in their familiarity, now felt suffocating, closing in on her. Emma tried to ignore the unease and settled onto the couch, wrapping herself in a thick blanket, the soft glow of her lamp casting long shadows across the room. The clock ticked louder than usual, each second stretching into an eternity. She flicked on the TV, hoping the noise would drown out her growing discomfort. But the whispers, faint and distant, began. She froze. Were they real? Her heart skipped a beat as the voice, low and indistinct, seemed to come from every corner of the room. She jumped up, flicking off the TV and straining her ears. Silence. Just as she was about to breathe a sigh of relief, the doorbell rang. Her pulse quickened. Who could it be at this hour? She had no visitors, no family in town, no friends dropping by unannounced. Hesitantly, she got up and crossed the living room. Peering through the peephole, she saw nothing. An empty hallway. No one. The faint flicker of the hallway light created unsettling shadows, making the space feel darker than it should be. Confused, she opened the door, only to find a small, old-fashioned envelope resting on the doormat. No name, no return address, just a single word, scrawled in black ink on the front: run. Her fingers shook as she bent down to pick it up. The paper felt unnaturally cold against her skin. Inside the envelope, there was another message, handwritten in a hurried, jagged script: they know where you are. Don't trust anyone. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She looked around, as if expecting someone to jump out at her. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. She had no idea who sent it, or why. The words didn't make sense. Who was they? Why was she being warned? Panic gnawed at her, but she couldn't understand what was happening. She stared at the message again, and something about the handwriting seemed familiar, distant, yet oddly personal. The silence returned, but it was heavier this time, more oppressive. She couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone anymore. Something, or someone, was watching her. And the worst part was, she didn't know what to do next. Part 2. The Haunting Voice. The days following the strange delivery became a blur for Emma. The unease that had begun the night of the mysterious letter had only grown stronger. The whispers, which she had initially convinced herself were figments of her imagination, now felt very real, like cold fingers brushing the nape of her neck. The unsettling silence in her apartment was no longer peaceful, it was thick with anticipation, as though something was waiting just out of sight, breathing with her, sharing her every movement. It started with the lightest sounds, a faint murmur in the corners of the room. At first, Emma thought it was just the hum of the refrigerator or the creaks of the old building settling. But then, one night, while she sat alone on the couch, the whispers grew clearer, more defined. She could make out words now, chilling and fragmented, like a voice coming from an impossibly distant place. They're coming, Emma. Her breath caught in her throat. She sat up straight, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. She glanced around, but the apartment was empty, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. The whispers continued, growing louder, until they seemed to fill the entire room. Run, Emma, they know where you are, you can't escape. She snapped to her feet, her heart hammering in her chest. The walls felt as if they were closing in, suffocating her. She spun around, her eyes darting over every corner of the room. The voice sounded as though it was coming from the walls themselves, from the cracks and crevices, yet there was no one there. She ran to the door, her hands trembling as she yanked it open to find only the empty hallway, eerily silent. As the days wore on, the whispers did not fade, instead, they grew more persistent, more urgent. They followed her around the apartment like a shadow she could never shake. Every night, they taunted her, their words becoming darker, more ominous. Don't trust anyone, Emma. They're already here, watching you. *. The words chilled her to the bone. Who were they? Who was watching her? The realization that something, someone, was lurking in the shadows of her life sent waves of panic crashing through her. It was as though the very fabric of her reality had been torn apart. She tried to reach out to her friends, but whenever she called, the phone went straight to voicemail. Each message she left was met with silence. She was alone, and the voices made it clear that they didn't want her to forget it. One night, in the dead of silence, the whispers changed. This time, they didn't come from the walls, but from behind her. She turned slowly, but no one was there. Yet the voice was so close, it felt as though it was right beside her, its cold breath tickling her ear. "It's too late, Emma. You're already ours." Asterisk. The words were a final sentence, sealing her fate. Emma stumbled back, her mind reeling. What had started as strange occurrences was now an undeniable truth: she wasn't alone. And whatever they weren't going to let her go. Part 3, The Hidden Door. The days that followed the eerie whispers were a blur of fear and confusion. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with her apartment, as if the very walls were closing in around her. The presence, the whispers, they were always there, lurking, waiting. She couldn't breathe without feeling like someone was watching her. One night, desperate for an explanation, Emma decided to search every inch of her apartment. She needed to understand why the air felt so thick, why every shadow seemed alive. She started with her bedroom closet, methodically pushing aside boxes filled with forgotten clothes and old trinkets. Her fingers brushed against the back wall, and something felt off, too smooth, too even. Her heart began to race. She traced her hand along the surface, and there it was, a faint seam, almost invisible, like the wall itself had been stitched together. The whispers seemed to grow louder as she pressed her palm against the cold, smooth surface. The air around her grew dense, oppressive, and she could hear them now, clearer than ever. "You shouldn't be doing this, Emma." Asterisk. Ignoring the voice, she pried at the wall. A loud click echoed in the room as a hidden door creaked open. Emma froze, her breath caught in her throat. The room beyond the door was pitch black, the kind of darkness that seemed to stretch into eternity. With shaky hands, she stepped inside, but her pulse quickened as she spotted an ancient mirror standing in the far corner. Its ornate frame was cracked, covered in layers of dust, but what truly terrified her wasn't the mirror, it was the reflection. It wasn't her own face staring back. Instead, a gaunt figure stood in the mirror, its hollow eyes locked onto hers. It smiled, a grin too wide to be human. Emma's breath caught in her throat. The figure in the mirror moved its hand slowly, as if to reach through the glass. She slammed the door shut, but the image lingered in her mind, its eyes following her every move. The whispers became deafening. "You can't escape." Part 4, The Shadows in the Mirror. Emma could hardly believe what she had seen. The mirror was an object of pure terror now, and every time she closed her eyes, that figure, its hollow, dead eyes, its twisted smile, haunted her. No matter how much she tried to rationalize it, to convince herself that it was just a trick of the mind, deep down she knew that something far worse had taken root in her apartment. The figure in the mirror wasn't a mere reflection. It was real. Over the next few days, the mirror became an obsession. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that it was calling to her. No matter where she went in her apartment, she felt its presence, watching her, waiting. She tried to avoid it, but the whispers always seemed to lead her back to it, urging her to look, to understand. Asterisk. Every night, she found herself drawn to the closet, unable to resist the pull of the dark room. The mirror seemed to grow larger, more oppressive, its surface now shimmering unnaturally, almost alive. The figure was there, always watching, always smiling. Its eyes were locked on hers, unwavering, unblinking. Each time she approached, the whispers grew louder, clearer. "Come closer, Emma. It's time." Asterisk. With trembling hands, she reached out, her fingers hovering above the mirror's surface. Her breath caught in her throat as she felt an almost electric charge in the air around her. The whispers began to distort, becoming more urgent, desperate. "It's too late. You're already ours." Asterisk. Suddenly, without warning, the reflection in the mirror shifted. The figure no longer stood still. It began to move, its arms jerking in unnatural, twisted motions as it stepped forward, inching closer to the glass. Emma backed away, her heart racing in her chest, but the reflection followed her, its gaze never leaving her face. The room around her seemed to distort. The shadows grew darker, stretching out, curling like smoke. The reflection in the mirror began to change, warping, as if the figure was trying to push through the glass. It reached its hand forward, its fingers stretching, growing longer and thinner, until they seemed to reach out of the mirror. Emma screamed, stumbling backward, but the fingers were too fast. They slid through the surface-like liquid, wrapping around her wrist with a cold, vice-like grip. The mirror shuddered as the figure's face emerged, its features grotesque and twisted. Emma's scream was choked off as it yanked her forward. She felt herself being dragged toward the mirror, her body moving as though it were no longer her own. The reflection was pulling her in, its cold hands tightening around her, suffocating her. Desperate, she clawed at the floor, trying to break free, but the mirror's power was too strong. Her surroundings began to blur, the walls dissolving into a swirling vortex of darkness. She reached out for anything to hold onto, but it was useless. The figure's fingers were now fully through the glass, its face inches from hers, its smile wide and merciless. "You belong to us now," it whispered, its voice slithering into her mind. In that moment, Emma realized with horror that she was no longer standing in her apartment. She was in the mirror. And the world she had known was slipping away, leaving her trapped in a place where shadows and nightmares lived. The door slammed shut behind her, and the whispers fell silent. But Emma wasn't alone anymore. The figure was still there, waiting. Part 5, The Revelation. Emma's world had shifted into a nightmare. The mirror wasn't just a reflection anymore, it was a portal, a gateway into something far darker than she had ever imagined. Trapped in the eerie, shifting space beyond the glass, she felt the weight of centuries pressing down on her, suffocating her every breath. The figure, now fully formed and standing beside her, its hollow eyes gleaming with malevolent satisfaction, watched her every move. Time didn't seem to exist in this place. It was a void of endless shadows, shifting between reality and nightmare, twisting in a way that made Emma feel as though she was slipping in and out of consciousness. She could no longer tell where she ended and the darkness began. The air was thick, heavy with whispers that never ceased. "You can't run from us, Emma. You never could." The voice came from every direction at once, and her heart pounded as it filled her head, making it feel like her skull might split open. She squeezed her eyes shut, desperate to block it out, but the whispers clawed at her mind, growing louder, more insistent. "This is where we bring those who are chosen. Those who dare to meddle with the beyond." Emma's stomach twisted with terror. She had heard something ancient, whispered among the walls of the building when she first moved in. But now it became clear. The building, the apartment, the mirror, it was all part of something far older than she had realized. The truth she had been running from had been staring her in the face the entire time. She had to know more. She had to understand what had happened. Desperate, Emma gathered what was left of her strength and began to search through the endless shadows, feeling her way through the void. The floor beneath her feet shifted constantly, as if the very space around her was alive. And then, as if the darkness itself had decided to reveal its secrets, Emma's fingers brushed against something cold and smooth. A book. Her heart leapt. She pulled it from the shadows, the cover worn and old, the pages brittle to the touch. The book opened to a page filled with cryptic symbols, a language she didn't recognize. The text seemed to shimmer, as if the letters were alive, shifting before her eyes. She ran her fingers over the pages, a sense of dread building as she deciphered the words. It was a ritual, a binding spell. The curse. The spirits trapped in the mirror. They were not just reflections, they were the souls of those who had dared to enter, to summon them from the other side. The mirror was not merely a portal, it was a prison. And now, Emma realized, she had been marked for eternity. "You were never meant to escape," the figure beside her whispered, its voice almost tender now, mocking her. Suddenly, the room began to shift again, and Emma felt herself pulled toward the center of the darkness. The walls began to close in, the whispers drowning her thoughts. Desperation surged through her. She needed to find a way out, a way to break the curse, but the book's words were too cryptic, too incomplete. And then, like a dark revelation from the depths of her fear, Emma understood. The only way to stop the curse, to stop them, was a sacrifice, her own. You belong to us now, Emma. Forever. Asterisk. Her final scream echoed through the void as the darkness claimed her. She had become one with the mirror, one with the shadows. And the cycle would continue, waiting for the next soul to fall into the same trap. Part 6. The Final Choice. Emma's breath caught in her throat as the mirror pulsed again, the shadows around her swirling faster. The figure that had haunted her every moment, its hollow, twisted face, stood before her, its eyes now glowing with an unnatural fire. The air thickened, pressing against her chest, squeezing out any hope of escape. She felt trapped in this dark, suffocating world, its cold grasp pulling her further into the void. But then, something strange happened. A sharp, jolting sensation shot through her body, like 1,000 needles piercing her skin. Emma cried out, her mind going numb for a moment. The darkness seemed to distort, the mirror growing deeper, more infinite, pulling at her very soul. She reached out instinctively, grasping the book she had found earlier, now open in her hands. The cryptic symbols on its pages danced before her eyes, almost alive. Asterisk. In that moment, she understood. This wasn't just the curse of the mirror, it was a trap, set long ago. The souls of the damned didn't just disappear into the darkness, they were bound to the mirror, forced to relive their final moments, over and over. They weren't waiting for someone to release them, they were waiting for someone to replace them. The realization hit Emma like a thunderclap. She wasn't meant to escape. No one ever was. She was just a pawn in an ancient game, a part of a cycle that had existed for as long as the mirror itself. But now, it was too late. She was already too far in. But there was a twist, there was a way to break the cycle. The book spoke of a final choice. The one who entered the mirror could choose to take the place of the entity within, sealing the curse for eternity. But that meant sacrificing herself entirely, her body, her soul, forever. Emma's heart raced as the figure in the mirror stepped closer. It smiled, its lips curling into something more sinister than before. You know what you must do. Asterisk. For a moment, Emma hesitated. She didn't want to die. She didn't want to be forgotten, her life reduced to a memory in a twisted reflection. But then, she thought of the others, those trapped before her, whose souls could never be freed. She had to end this. She had to free them, even if it meant becoming a part of the mirror herself. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes and whispered the words from the book. As the words left her lips, the mirror shattered with a deafening crack, its surface splintering into 1,000 pieces, releasing a torrent of light and shadows. Emma screamed, feeling herself pulled into the void once more, but this time, there was no fear. As the light engulfed her, she realized, she wasn't alone. The souls of the damned were with her now, guiding her, as her own identity began to fade. She would become one with them, part of the endless cycle of the mirror. And then, everything went quiet. The next morning, Emma's apartment was just as it had always been. The rain still pattered against the windows, the shadows still crept along the walls. But when a new tenant moved in, they noticed something strange, a mirror where there had been none before, sitting innocently against the wall, its glass pristine, gleaming. And just beyond the glass, there was a faint reflection of a woman, smiling. As the darkness closes in, our journey tonight comes to an end, but the shadows still whisper their secrets, and some stories are better left untold, or are they? If you've made it this far, you've felt the chill of the unknown, and remember, this won't be our last meeting. The night is never truly silent, and there's always something lurking, watching, waiting. Until we cross paths again, stay vigilant, and sleep tight, if you can. If you enjoy this story, so please subscribe my channel and set bell icon on all. Also share my video to others and like my video as a appreciation. Thanks.